What do you think are the options at this point, given the realities on the ground?
So what I've observed is that Trump in America, they're behaving exactly the way that an empire decline behaves, which is that they suffer from a toxic and lethal combination of both hubris and desperation, meaning that they continue to underestimate the resilience and resolve of the Iranians, and they are desperate for a knockout punch as quickly as possible. Trump wants this war to end as soon as possible because he knows that the longer this war drags on, the worse the economy will suffer, the worse his polling will be, and the more likely the stock market will tank. So he's looking for a knockout punch. And right now, if you're looking for a quick solution, if you're looking for a gamble, well, your best option is Karg Island, because as you point out, that is where Iran exports 90% of its oil, primarily to China. So right now, a Marine expeditionary force is traveling from Japan to the Middle East, and we should expect them to arrive maybe in about a week. And there's about 2,500 of them, and they specialize in amphibious landing. So the idea is that they will bombard the coastline in Clark Island, and this will enable the Marines to land and secure the oil deposits of Clark Island. And at this point, Trump will declare victory and try to get the Iranians to the negotiating table and says, listen, I have Clark Island, and this is your economic lifeline. So let's cut a deal that allows us to both save face. Okay. And I think that is the plan. But there are a lot of issues with this plan. Okay. The first issue is that Clark Island is not as important economically as people believe. That's the first issue, meaning that even if you were to secure Clark Island, Iran does have workarounds where they can just ship from the coast. That's issue number one. Issue number two is that Iran needs financing for this war. And now they're using this oil as financing, as collateral financing. But if the Chinese and the Russians believe that the Americans want to strangle Iran, then it's not in their best interest to see Iran destroyed. Then they're going to provide financing anyway. And look, the reality is that now that oil is shooting up in price, this benefits Russia tremendously, right? So Putin can take all this oil riches and finance Iran in fighting this war, because Russia has the most to lose if Iran loses this war and there's regime change. Okay, so that's issue number two.
You think Russia has more to lose than China?
I do. I do. And the reason why is that if Iran were to fall, this opens up the Russian southern flank to the Americans, right? Because Azerbaijan is an Israeli-American ally. And if Iran were to fall, then the Americans and Israelis could stage operations from the south. Also, Iran has been providing a lot of support to Russia in the Ukraine war. So Russia is getting most of its drones from Iran. So Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said that Russia will protect Iran, and Russia is most interested in the Iran government staying intact. And there's been reporting from American news outlets that American intelligence believes that Russia is providing targeting for the Iranians. So all these drone strikes, all these ballistic missile strikes, they're getting intelligence and targeting from the Russians, which, by the way, is what NATO did in Ukraine, right? So from the Russian perspective, it's payback. So the Russians are heavily invested in the Iranians winning this war. The Chinese are pragmatic. They really don't care. They see Iran more as a major supplier of oil that they need. But if they need to shift supply routes, they can do so, right? So the Russians are heavily invested, and so they would finance the Iranians regardless if Iran is no longer able to export oil. Okay, and another issue is this: if you attack the economic lifeline of Iran, they now have incentive to strike at the oil refineries of the GCC, right? Because no matter how much economic damage you can do to Iran, they can do so much more to the GCC. And this would cause the price of oil to spike. Remember, Iranians have said that their goal is to spike the price of oil to $200 a barrel. Now it's about $100 a barrel. And so what they're saying is that we're going to fight a very long war of attrition that could last years. So I don't see what the strategic benefit of taking Khark Island is. Now, the last problem, and this is the most important, is that once you take Khark Island, you expose the Marines to drone strikes and artillery strikes from the coast, which means that you now need to send in more Marines to secure the coast, right? So you send in 2,000, 3,000 troops to secure Khark Island. You've done that easily, but they can't secure the island against Iranian drones. So the only way you can do that is by taking the coastline along Khark Island. You do that with tens of thousands of Marines, but then you expose these Marines to attacks from the mountains, the Zagros Mountains, right? These drones, these missiles from the Zagros Mountains, which means that now you have to invest 100,000 troops to go after Iran's underground missile facilities. And this is exactly what happened in Vietnam. The great irony of all this is that the Marine Expeditionary Force that is going to Iran is the same force that went into Vietnam and marked the first major ground involvement of the Americans in about 1965. They basically went into Da Nang and secured the Air Force base. And at first it was like 3,500 soldiers, and that was supposed to be it. Like 5 years later, you're at 500,000 American soldiers, right? So once you send in ground troops, then it creates a momentum of its own, and then you have mission creep, and then sunk cost fallacy, and then eventually you have a national draft. Okay, so that is the great danger of taking Khark Island at this point.